Good evening. For those that I have not met yet, I'm Raya Shadursky, and I'm Director of Operations for the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, UJE. And if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about our organization, we have complimentary copies of our brochure and our latest publication on the table outside the entrance, and we even provided bags, so you feel free to take 1 or 2 copies of the books and the brochure. And on behalf of UJE, St. Vladimir Institute, the Ukrainian Canadian Research and Documentation, the UCRDC, and the Toronto office of the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, we welcome all of you to tonight's presentation. I would now like to introduce Yuri Dashko. He's a member of the Board of Directors of UCRDC, and he will be your moderator for this evening. Yuri.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, Dobry Večer. As Ryan mentioned, I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Ukrainian Canadian Research and Documentation Center. The UCRDC is a nonprofit community organization which collects catalogs and preserves material documenting the history, culture, and contributions of Ukrainians throughout the world. UCRDC produces documentary films, prepares educational materials, and sponsors lectures, conferences, and exhibits on various topics related to Ukrainian issues. Within the UCRDC, my area of focus is Ukrainian-Jewish relations. Currently on our website, there is an oral history project about Ukrainians who assisted Jews during the Holocaust. This will be augmented in the future with textual and photographic records in the same area. The 1-hour talk this evening will be followed by an opportunity to put questions to Dr. Shchupak. Dr. Igor Shchupak is Jewish Ukrainian and was born in Zaporizhia City, Ukraine in 1961. Dr. Shchupak's family members lived through the Ukrainian famine genocide, the Holocaust, as well as fighting in the Second World War, both in the Soviet Army and the partisan movement. Dr. Shchupak attended the Faculty of History at the Zaporizhia National University in 1979. He defended his PhD in Ukrainian history in 1995. In 2002, he also received an equivalent PhD degree from the University of Toronto. Starting in 1999, he took part in the creation of Tkuma, the Ukrainian Institute for Holocaust Studies, and is currently its director. In 2010, he was also involved in creating the Museum of Jewish Memory and Holocaust in Ukraine. It's located in the Menorah Center, the largest multifunctional center in Dnipro City. The museum, which was opened in October 2012, is the largest museum in Ukraine dedicated to Jewish history in Ukraine. He's the author of more than 120 scientific works on the history of Jews, the Holocaust, and problems of interethnic relations in Europe. From 2002 to 2004, Dr. Shchupak was editor-in-chief of Forum, a Toronto-based bi-weekly magazine dealing with Ukrainian issues. He's a member of the Ukrainian-Polish and Ukrainian-German Commissions on History, as well as a member of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine Working Group on upgrading educational programs and history textbooks. He is also the author of a grade 7 world history textbook, authorized by the Ministry of Education of Ukraine and adopted by the majority of schools throughout Ukraine. In 2018, he was recognized as an honored worker of education of Ukraine. Dr. Shchupak is currently working on a second PhD, which is focused upon Ukrainians who rescued Jews during the Holocaust. Dr. Shchupak's topic this evening is They Saved Other People's Children Risking Their Own. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shchupak.
Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be speaking in front of such an esteemed audience. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for my broken English. Although these days of Russian aggression against Ukraine, it's better to speak broken English than sophisticated Russian. Mr. Yuri Dashko told about me very well, very good. He said about me many kind words that they can be used in obituary and epitaph, but I hope not now, later. And it's the picture of my books, scholarly books and textbooks for students of public schools of Ukraine. It's not all, will be more. But I'd like to add a few words about myself to Mr. Yuri's speech, if possible. In 2002, I immigrated to Canada, and now I'm a dual citizen or both. And you see, I identify myself as a Ukrainian Jewish Canadian, or Canadian Ukrainian Jewish man, or Канадець, Українець, Євреєць. Which is why I have the honor now of working with Ukrainian Canadian Research and Documentation Center and Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, and thank to personally Jim Temerty for visiting this lecture. Thank you very much. And I'd like to cooperate with Toronto office of the Canadian Institute for Ukrainian Studies. Now you see the picture of a menorah center. Some of my biggest projects now are in Dnipro city, Dnipro former Dnipropetrovsk. The Dnipro is unofficial Jewish capital of Ukraine. Don't worry, not the capital of Canada yet, but it's the symbol of my museum. In seriousness, I'd like to talk about the rescue of Jews during the Second World War. You know, the subject of my second dissertation is Ukrainian rescues of Jews during this Holocaust, and I would like to talk about some aspects of this topic. First, features of the Holocaust and rescued Jews in the occupied territory of Ukraine. Second, problems of definition of rescue. Third, who and why rescued Ukrainian Jews. Next, examples of rescue, and etc., etc. It depends on time. I hope here will be on regular Jewish time. First point, features of the Holocaust and rescued Jews on the occupied territory of Ukraine. There were some nuclear differences in both the genocide of Jews and the rescue in territories of occupied Ukraine versus that of Europe. For example, even after the rescue operation of Dutch Jews, the Nazis penalized the Dutch with patience and mercy. The most brutal repression was winded out to those who took leadership in organizing the rescues. Scholars note that in France or Holland, anytime a rescue of Jews was found to be guilty of helping to save Jewish lives, they would likely find themselves on road to the concentration camp along with the Jews. Whereas in Polish occupied territory, as well as in USSR, they would have been shot on the spot. Every Ukrainian knew that upon helping a Jew, he was risking not only his own life, but that of his family and his children. And yet, knowing this terrible risk, the number of Ukrainian rescues was in the thousands. The conditions of the Nazi regime in the occupied territory of Ukraine varied, and as such, so did the operation of Jewish rescue. The captured Ukrainian lands were divided by Nazis and their allies into several occupation zones. I can show you this map. You see first district of Galicia. It's the territory of modern Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, and part of Ternopil regions. Second biggest occupation zone, Race Commissariat Ukraine. It's territory of modern Volyn, Dnipro, Zhytomyr, Zaporizhia, Khmelnytsky, Kyiv, Kirovograd, Poltava, Rivne regions, partly Mykolaiv, Ternopil, Vinnytsia, and Odessa region, as well as separate regions of the south of modern Belarus. Third, Transnistria. Transnistria governorate, part of modern Vinnytsia, Mykolaiv, and Odessa region, as well as the eastern part of the modern territory of the Republic of Moldova. And four, zone of military administration. It's modern Chernihiv, Sum, Kharkiv, Donetsk, and Lugansk region. Besides that, some parts of the Ukraine territory were added to the satellite states of Hitler's Germany. Chernihiv Sea, that part of the Odessa region, to Romania, Zakarpattia region to Hungary. The territory of Crimea was formerly part of the Reichskommissariat Ukraine, but in reality it was under military command. On this map, you can see the border between different occupation zones. And the free mobility of people between these zones was restricted. I personally have found multiple archived documents describing the punishment for illegal crossing over these borders. For instance, between the district of Galicia and Race Commissariat of Ukraine. According to the position of Ukrainians land inhabitants in relation to the Holocaust, they can be divided into several groups. First, passive observers of Nazi crimes. In contemporary historiography, they are called bystanders. Second, murders and their followers. Third, rescues of Jews and righteous among nations. In Ukraine, part of the Jews died in the ghetto, for example, in Transnistria or in western Ukraine. But most of the Jews in Ukraine were victims of mass shootings. Father Patrick Dubois, very famous French researcher, called this Holocaust by bullets. It was typical for Ukrainian Holocaust. In Babi Yar, more than 33,000 Jews were shot in 2 days. It's ugly world record. In the Ukrainian territory, there are about 5,000 places of mass shootings in the local Babi Yar. Altogether, during the Holocaust, about 1.5 million Ukrainian Jews were killed, which is a quarter of the 6 million victims of the Holocaust. Thus, Babi Yar is a symbol of the Holocaust in the East Europe, as Auschwitz-Birkenau in Oswiecim city is in the rest of Europe. In general, it should be emphasized that any Ukrainian political force or military organization did not stand up for the Jews during Holocaust in Ukraine. The Soviet government, which had information on the extermination of Jews by the Nazis, did not bring into the attention of the Jewish population. There were no declaration appeal to the Ukrainian people to provide assistance to the Jews, neither from the Ukrainian or Polish underground movement, nor from the Soviet government and the subordinate partisan detachments and underground, with the exception of the Zhekota in Poland and the western part of Ukrainian territory. I will illustrate my further speech with photos from our museum, Jewish Memory and Holocaust in Ukraine, and as well as my personal archive materials. Everywhere in Europe, Nazis exterminated Jews who were considered inhumans according to racial theory. But in the occupied territory of the USSR, in particular in the territory of Ukraine, the Nazis proclaimed Jews as the founder and guardians of the Bolshevik system, Judeo-Commune, like Żydo-Communa mythology. That is why the extermination of Jews in Ukraine has become particularly cruel. The attitude of the Nazis towards the Ukrainians and other Slavs who rescued the Jews was also especially cruel. This was due to several factors. In accordance with the Nazi racial theory, Slavic peoples were the status of half-human, Untermenschen, you know this German term. Based on this, the Ukrainian rescues of Jews were under more severe punishment than, for example, Dutchmen or Danes who were racially close to Aryan, до щирих арійців, як казав. Second, the cruelty of the Nazis against Ukrainians in general and Ukrainians who rescued Jews was determined as well by the strategic plans of the Nazi Reich for the colonization of the occupied territory of Ukraine and its liberation from a large part of the Ukrainian population. And third, just in the 20th century, the population of Ukraine's lands suffered tremendous tragedies. People, witnesses, or became victims of mass murders. The First World War, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the bloody Civil War took millions of lives. Genocide of the Ukrainian people, the Holodomor of 1932-33, organized by the Soviet government, mass repression and great terror of 1937-38 led to the situation when the killing of a huge number of people wasn't perceived by majority as something extremely horrible. Famous historian Timothy Snyder, a very close partner of UJE, remarked that some of the territory of Ukraine is a bloodlands, and the massacre of millions of people was received as commonplace and banal, unfortunately. You know the book of Timothy Snyder, Bloodlands. Next point is the point about definition. Terminology definition is an important issue in the study of the phenomenon of rescue of Jews from the Holocaust on the territory of Ukraine. The title of rescue of Jews is still a concern both in the public space and in a number of scholarly works. Today such terms are used. First, a more famous righteous among the nations, or righteous of the world, unofficial reduction of official title. Next, righteous of Ukraine. Next, righteous of Babi Yar. We found many documents about attempts to rescue Jews by Ukrainians, Poles, Russian, and other people who lived on the territory of modern Ukraine and who wasn't submitted to the Yad Vashem Commission. For example, in archive, dozens of cases of Nazi courts are kept on the people accused of hiding Jews. But the most important, dozens of no attempts of rescue the Jews by Ukrainian and obviously hundreds of unknowns still remains out of researchers and research institution attention. To avoid the current challenges in definition, we consider it necessary to put into scientific practice the definition rescue of Jews during the Holocaust, no depends of Yad Vashem terminology. Under this definition, we mean both righteous among the nations and those people for who proofs of Jews' rescues can be recognized by historical science. You can see a photo. It's the hall of my museum, Jewish Memory and Holocaust in Ukraine, special hall, a rescue of Jews during the Holocaust and righteous among the nations. This hall culmination of our museum. Here we are talking about how the Jews were rescued in different countries and about the specific rescues in different countries and in different areas of Ukraine. It's this hall, and in the whole Righteous Among Nations we have created the first exhibition in Europe dedicated to Metropolitan Andrei Sheptitsky, who saved more than 150 Jews during the Holocaust. Ukraine is one of the fourth place in the world by the number of righteous among nations, according to Yad Vashem. You see different places: Poland number 1, Netherlands number 2, France number 3, and Ukraine number 4. Tkuma Institute and Holocaust Museum annually published 10-15 books devoted to the Holocaust and the rescue of Ukrainian Jews during the Holocaust. You can see these books here or here, and I'd like to say about this book, a very interesting album of pictures of Ukrainian cities on the period of Nazi occupation. More than 700 pictures, original, first publication. This one, very interesting book by Professor Vladislav Rinevich about moral atmosphere in Ukrainian Soviet society before Second World War. And Professor Rinevich destroyed mythology about special attention and positive attention of population to Soviet regime, to Soviet ideology, and etc. Different books about Holocaust, about inter-ethnic relationship, and etc. But now we need to talk first of all about rescue of Jews. You see some books and materials about rescue of Jews. And in 2016 we released edition this book, reference book, Ukrainian Rescues of Jews During the Holocaust. It contains information about all the inhabitants of Ukraine recognized as righteous. Based on Yad Vashem data and our own research, we systematized data about the place or residence of righteous, the religious or national affiliation, where it was possible to find out social status, and etc. And very interesting that the introduction article to this guide is very important. It is called a book about those who return people's confidence. This philosophical and deep article wrote Miroslav Marinovich, our friend and partner, prorector of Ukrainian Catholic University, dissident, one of the Ukrainian Helsinki Union founders. By the way, the first person who was listed exactly Ukrainian righteous was Olena Viter, Greek Catholic monastery mother superioress, organization of Ukrainian nationalist member. Igumen Olena Viter sheltered Jewish children from the Nazis in the Lviv orphanages, which was under her care during the years of German occupation. Among those children were Lily Polmanstein, she lives in Great Britain now, Nathan Levin, and etc. Before Olena Viter, there also were Ukrainian representatives whose names were written in the honorable list of the Righteous Among Nations, but they were written as Polish or the USSR citizens. Receiving the honorary title in 1976, Olena insisted on the fact that Ukraine should be written as her motherland, and was first example of Ukrainian writer among nations. In this reference book, this Dovidnik, there is a table showing how many writers were discovered in Ukraine since 1960s. No, I don't know, is it clear or not? But from the table you can see, if you can, the work on the searching Ukrainian writers among the nation was not active before the collapse of the Soviet communist system. They were found only 160 writers before 1991. From 1945 to 1991, only 160. For almost 30 years, and from 1991 until now, almost 2,400. However, we understand that after 1991, after Ukrainian independence, much less living witnesses of the Holocaust and the rescues of its victims are left than witnesses soon after the end of World War II. It is obvious that the actual number of Ukrainian rescues significantly exceeded the official Yad Vashem data. Next table dedicated to the question who and why rescued Ukrainian Jews. Based on the data, a significant amount of cases of Jews rescue were reported in regions where Jews were a sizable portion of the demography, biggest chapter of population. And you see a different chapter of Ukraine. South Ukraine, North Ukraine, Western Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, and etc. And we know about Soviet propaganda, Soviet ideology approach that Bolshevik are majority rescues of Jews. But reality absolutely different. First of all, unique Vinnytsia region. I can say why. And on Western Ukraine was majority Ukrainian righteous among the nation. And astonishing statistic is that the amount of righteous among the nations in the Vinnytsia Oblast comprised close to 20% of all the righteous among the nations in Ukraine, which is 10% higher than in Eastern Ukraine, South Ukraine, including Jewish Odessa, and Crimea combined. There is an explanation to this. Why? Vinnytsia Oblast was divided along the border of German occupation and Romanian occupation. Many residents of Vinnytsia Oblast organized secret passageway to the Romanian occupation zone for refugees, where they can find safety through bribery. In Romanian occupation, it was more easy. Representatives of different nationalities belonging to different social groups took part in the rescue of Jews in the territory of Ukraine occupied by Nazis. This in particular can be evidenced by the analysis of documents from Żych, Jewish Żydowski Instytut Historyczny, Jewish Institute of History in Poland. Documents of Żych collection. For example, I'd like to talk about certificate of Ernie Klinger, a former teacher, tailor, who has born in 1918. I would like to show a small table with information about those who assisted the persecuted Jewish women after my analysis of documents. And what we can see is different parameter, and we take a look at the social position, the position of the one who provides aid. And interesting, you can see, if you see, SS officer, for example, or commissar of the Ukrainian police, or a lady of the night, or family driver, or cabaret dancer, or prisoner, family Polish, and etc. About nationality, interesting, 30% Poles, 30% Ukrainians, and 30% Germans. Generally, 20 people participate in this project of saving of this madam. The table does not allow generalization, since it contains data from the memories of only one saved Jewish woman. However, even such information allows you to feel certain atmosphere and society in the moods of different people. Each person made a choice to be an outsider, to be an accomplice in crime, or to confront them, to help Jews and rescue them. Without the support of the local non-Jewish population representatives, there was no chance to rescue the Jews. And I'd like to illustrate this sentence by the story of one salvation. Maybe you know about, who knows about history of Aaron Weiss? No, Professor Sisi should. He is historian again. I close know Aaron Weiss. Before the war, they lived in Borislav town in western Ukraine. It's close to Drohobych, to Truskavets, if you know what Naftusia. It's this area. I recorded memories of Aaron Weiss and used them to write a book, The Story of One Salvation. I can show you unique pictures of this area, and who has roots, family roots in western Ukraine, in Drohobych area, here. Oh, nice. You can see it's absolutely unique pictures. The Galicia town of Borislav was inhabited by Ukrainians, Poles, and Jews. These three communities created Ukrainian, Polish, Jewish triangle, which was common for Western Ukraine. It was traditionally. The situation in this territory during World War II in many ways shaped by the relation between people inside this triangle. You see pictures of Soviet occupation in 1939 and German occupation in 1941. At the beginning of the Nazi occupation, Borislav, like many other cities and towns of Ukraine, faced a number of anti-Jewish pogroms. Writers were mainly presented by lumpens, marginals, or shumowinia, it's special word for this marginal people from Polish language, if I write. As they were called, the Weiss family asked their neighbor, Ukrainian woman Yulia Matchishin, to shelter them. Yulia hid this family in a very secret place in the attic. And you see pictures of pogroms, and you see this building. And then the terrible moment came when the pogromers went to Yulia's case. Where is the Weiss family? They asked. They were not kidding. They had bloody batons, axes, and other hands. Aaron Weiss recalled its quote. We saw this dialogue between them and our Ukrainian woman. Where is the family? Where is the Weiss family? It does not matter whether they are in my house or not. But you will not pass through this doorstep. What are these pogroms doing? They left what could this little woman do to them? Nothing. But she had some kind of power. They left. It's more important. So the Jewish family was rescued by the strength of the spirit of this Ukrainian woman. The time passed, the terrible time of the Nazi occupation. The Weiss family was sent to the Jewish ghetto of Borislav. Before leaving, the Weiss family suggested that their Ukrainian neighbor Yulia move to their house, which was bigger than Yulia's house. When it became clear that the Jews would be exterminated, the Weiss family fled and again to Yulia. She did not know that before the Weiss family was sent to the ghetto, they built a double wall in their house. Aaron Weiss recalls, "Our mother is mother of Aaron Weiss. Our mother asked her, 'Pani Yulia, we are here, and we have no other choice. We ask you to hide us for a while. You see what has happened, don't you? And we are waiting for the answer which will decide our further life. We knew that we need to find a shelter where someone would hide us not for several days, but for a longer period. If we don't, that's it for us. But there are no longer 5 of us. My mother decided that she should take her sister, my aunt, and my cousin with us. Hence, there are 7 of us. It's Jewish tradition. It is difficult to describe those minutes when we were waiting for Yulia's answer. They seemed to us like hours. Both we and Yulia, we knew that the Nazis would shoot those who helped Jews. We looked at Pani Yulia, and she said, "I'm ready to help." So, in this narrow secret room, which was about 1 meter wide only, 4 adults and 3 children began to hide. Pani Yulia risked, and she was afraid not only of the Nazis. Her son, Yusek, served in the police. He participated in Jewish extermination action. You know what is action. And he didn't know that his mother was hiding Jews in her house. When Yusek visited his mother, the Weiss family had special feelings. They knew that on this day Yulia wouldn't manage to give them food. The situation became more dangerous. The Weiss family decided to move to another shelter, a cellar under a kindergarten next door. It was safer as not a lot of people knew about it. But to get here, they needed to pass through the courtyard of another neighbor, Polish woman, Pani Potężna. You know that the relationship between Ukrainians and Poles was difficult in this period. It was really Polish-Ukrainian war. But Yulia Matsyshin was Ukrainian nationalist. So Pani Yulia had to tell her Polish neighbors that she was hiding the Jews. What will the Polish woman answer? Will she denounce to the Nazis or not? Pani Yulia took a risk again and told the neighbor about the Jews. Pani Potężna answered, "The thing is that I had 1 Jew as well." Again, the Weiss were lucky. They made their way to the cellar. 8 of them have hidden there. The Weiss family spent long 22 months living on the verge of death in the cellar under the Operation Kindergarten. The whole this period, Yulia Macishin and her Polish neighbors were bringing food to the Jewish neighbors. I do not have time to talk in detail about their life in that cellar. This is separate ground. It's pictures from a famous movie by Olga Onishko, if you know about this story of rescue of Aaron Weiss. In 1944, when the Soviet army was liberating Borislav from the Hitlerites, the Weiss family left their shelter. They went back to their house which they shared with the Ukrainian woman. On the first evening, Pani Macishin asked Pani Weiss to hide her son policeman, Yusek. The Soviet power was going to execute him for execution of collaboration. To hide the policemen who participate in the actions and perhaps participate in the murders of their relatives. But it was Yulia's son. The Weiss family agreed. Aaron with his brother Sheva were bringing food to a farmer policeman. To that same cellar where they spent 22 months hiding from the Nazis and from Yusek. The Weiss family had the settled visit of the State Security Service, KGB. They looked for Yulia Macishin, mother of the public enemy. You know this definition, вороги народу. Aaron's mother answered, Yulia saved our lives. If you take her, you should take us too. We will not give her to you. Go away, said to KGBists. And she kicked away the Chekists. The Chekists exchanged glances and left, saying that they would return. The Weiss family and Julia packed up and waited for the car, black car, by KGB. They waited all night long. They knew that the Chekist, KGBists, usually make arrests on the morning. The morning came, but no arrived. Why? Nobody knows. Then there was the difficult and long road to Palestine, through Poland and other European countries torn pieces by war. The way to the Holy Land ran through a new unfreedom, English concentration camp in Cyprus. And unfortunately, Aaron got there. It's concentration camp for Jewish refugees in Cyprus. In Israel, Aaron takes up arms and fights for life in the war for independence of the newborn Jewish state. After the victory, he participates in the reconstruction of the country and chooses a new past history of the Holocaust, which he survived. By the way, Ukrainian-Canadian Research and Documentation Center archive has part of the memories of Aaron recorded in 1988, but I don't know the content of these memories. The story is not a Shakespeare's drama. It is much more dramatic. In that fight, life and death, murder and salvation, weakness and heroism connected the fates of different nations, different peoples and countries. My book, The Story of Rescue, Aaron Weiss family in the Triangle of Ukrainian-Polish-Jewish Relations, describe these issues. That story of rescue is an example of cooperation between people for rescue of Jews. Rescue operation of Jews by group of people are famous. Recently, we have seen more and more examples of how not only individuals, but also groups of people, sometimes larger enough, have participated in the rescue of Jews. Classic example of such help provided to Jews during the Holocaust shows Żegota activities, but I can't talk about now. We don't know much about the collective rescue of Jews in Ukrainian cities. I researched one example of these stories. In occupied Zaporizhia, Gennady, you need to know, Yevdokia Kupa, Ukrainian woman, hid the girl Maria Chapata, whose mother was shot by the Hitler soldiers. To protect the child from arrest and extermination, neighbors asked the German authorities to issue the Ukrainian passport to Maria, fake passport. 4 persons agreed to be an official witnesses in Gestapo, even understanding what could happen if they lied to the Nazis. Nevertheless, almost all residents of the street knew about the Jewish girl hiding from the Nazis. Several dozen people, and none of them betrayed Maria, and many of them helped her. It's Zaporozhian history. The story of the rescue of Jews of the Gontov group consisted of 32 Jews, 1 man, 10 women, 21 children, including several nurses, is unique. These people have traveled at least 1,000 kilometers across the 5 occupied regions of Russia and Ukraine, passed through many settlements, dozens of water barriers, and took refuge in Blagodatne village, Krinchansky district of the Dnipropetrovsk region, where they stayed for more than a year. The rescue was possible only due to help of the villagers. At the same time, none of the members of this group was killed. It's 32 Jews. Next example, Yaruha. Maybe you know. Yaruha, Mogiliev-Podilsky district of the Vinnytsia region is called Village of Righteous. During the World War II, its inhabitants managed to rescue about 1,000 Jews, village inhabitants, as well as several Jewish families deported from Bessarabia and Romania. I have many part of my lecture, but obviously I have to cut my lecture and do the Jewish circumcision. Economical factor of rescue, but maybe better to go to conclusions, and will be time for questions. Now to the question, who rescued the Jew of Ukraine? More often, the following categories of people were the rescues of the Jews. First, locals, Ukrainians, Poles, Russians, etc., who had Jewish relatives, spouses, husbands, parents of the spouses and their relatives. Second, partisans, undergrounds, who perceived the rescue of the Jews as one of the forms of resistance to the Nazi occupation. Third, inhabitants who were united with the Jews in neighbor life or joint war, studies before the war, and memory of the Jewish neighbors' good deeds in critical situations. The example of last can be case in the Jurin village of Vinnytsia region. The local Ukrainian peasants decided to help the Jews who during the years of collectivization and Holodomor stood up for a local priest. For the cases of Jewish rescue by Ukrainians were quite common because of religion beliefs, Christian attitude towards persecuted. But I have to admit that I don't have the answer for the main question about rescue motivation. This question, how could they risk the lives of their children rescuing others. One of the rescued Jews during the interview to a Polish journalist said, "I could give a beautiful answer, but I'll tell you truth. I have children and grandchildren who I love very much, most of all in the world. And in a similar situation, I could not risk their lives for the sake of others. And my rescue was able to do that. And she had 5 children, who she also loved very much. Why she could do this? I think she's just an angel only." Thank you.
Are there any questions for Dr. Shchupak?
Maybe a short comment as well as a question about how we can then look into this and decide who would then save others. In a certain way, what I always feel is that the isolation of studying of the Holocaust. What?
Sorry? Excuse me.
Hello?
You can use microphone. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll pass it.
It's very, very short cable.
Oh, sure, please.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so what I wanted to ask is this. We're trying to pose the question of why someone saved someone else in a difficult situation. And there's a tendency, I think, to isolate the study of the Holocaust during the war from the general situation. That perhaps the best way to decide who risks one's lives for others is to widen that circle. We already have discussions of which Poles tried to save Ukrainians, which Ukrainians tried to save Poles, to look into those groups. And then even to look more broadly into people who ostensibly are the same, your other fellow Ukrainians, but they were not only your fellow Ukrainians, they were many other things. So do you think anyone has tried to then take, because the Jewish examples are relatively few in number, whereas these other examples are much more numerous, that we could then create a typology of what kind of person acted to save in what kind of situation, and that would be a way to turn to answer your question.
It's typical question of professor. Many points in one question. If I can begin, first of all, about different categories of rescues, Poles and Ukrainians and etc. Territory with Polish national majority was a territory with more number of righteous amount nations. Western Ukraine, Vinnytsia region, and other areas had Polish majority, or many Polish citizens. And якщо можна, я б хотів українською мовою відповісти, буде легше. Справа в тому, що там, де поляків було багато, там і більше випадків рятування євреїв. Це так. Але я хочу повернутися до того, що я казав, що в списку праведників народів світу більше 1000 мешканців України приписані до поляків. Що мається на увазі? Що мається? Yeah?
Is there anyone who doesn't understand Ukrainian? Okay. So then I guess. All right. So what he said is that in areas where there were large numbers of Poles, there tend to be higher numbers of rescues. And he also talks about Western Ukraine as one of those areas where there was a relatively high number of Poles, and therefore that in some ways can be associated with those rescued.
І ситуація...
Don't forget that this is about 1,000.
And 1,000 Ukrainians.
Yeah, okay. Now, I was waiting, I couldn't remember the next slide, thank you. But he said one of our problems are in the attribution of nationality, and that approximately 1,000 Ukrainians have been,
Especially in Western Ukraine.
have been therefore listed as Poles, as Polish citizens.
Чому? Тому що дуже цікава ситуація в системі підрахунку Яд Вашем. Якщо поляк врятував на теренах Польщі, записується до Польщі. Якщо поляк врятував на теренах України, записується до Польщі. Якщо українець врятував на теренах Польщі, записується до Польщі. І тільки якщо українець на територіях до 39-го року території України, то записується до України.
It's partially the way that Yad Vashem accounts for these people. That is, if a Pole saved a Jew on Polish territories, it counts as a Pole. If a Pole saved Jews on Ukrainian territories, they count as a Pole. If a Ukrainian saved Jews on Polish territories, he counts as a Pole. So the way that Yad Vashem has chosen to count this, only those Ukrainians who are saving Jews on territories that were pre-1939 Soviet Ukraine are counted as Ukrainians.
Коли ми писали оцю книжку, тут перераховані всі українські праведники народів світу, і про кожного є інформація. Ми хотіли додати цю 1000, але тоді треба було змінювати таблицю Яд Вашем.
They wanted, when they did this book, to account those 1,000, but then it would be necessary as well to change the charts or the wall memorial in Yad Vashem.
Але ми хочемо співробітничати з Яд Вашем, тому залишили як є. Ще один момент.
We want to work with Yad Vashem, so we didn't pause this.
We have very close cooperation. Ви знаєте відомого професора Карла Бірхофа, який зазначає, що величезна кількість людей, які рятували, це були баптисти і представники протестантських церков.
Karl Birkhoff was a professor in the Netherlands, and by the way, University of Toronto PhD, counts the particularly high number of Baptists who saved
Protestants
and Protestants generally.
Да. Але ми знаємо, що взагалі дуже багато духовних людей, представників різних релігійних конфесій рятували, і це греко-католики, римо-католики, православні і, звичайно, протестанти.
And in general, clergy are also very high on this list, including Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox clergy and Greek Catholics.
Але коли я почав враховувати соціальний статус і взагалі статус людей, які рятували євреїв, я мав спочатку версію, що більшість цих рятівників – це інтелігенція.
When I began my looking into this field, I assumed that the highest percentage of this group would come from the intelligentsia or educated people.
Насправді виявилося, що абсолютно більшість це були селяни, прості люди. Чому це є окреме питання?
But it turned out that in fact it was peasants who were the most numerous in doing it. And this is, of course, a difficult question to say why this is the case.
І останнє, якщо ви пам'ятаєте оту таблицю, скільки праведників було в різних регіонах, в так званому червоному поясі, це Східна Україна, Південна Україна, частина центральна, була найменша кількість рятівників.
And then when you remember when I put up the map of the various regions of Ukraine, it turns out that it was in the south and the east that we have the lowest numbers of those who say Jews.
І це пов'язано з тим, що насправді далеко не завжди нацисти репресували комуністів. Є багато прикладів того, що якщо комуністи зареєструвалися в комендатурі чи в певних інституціях нацистських, вони спокійно переживали окупацію. І це сотні і тисячі людей, наприклад, на сході України. Комуністи, політичні працівники, які не брали участь там в якомусь верхньому щаблі влади, вони пережили нацистську окупацію, тому що зареєструвались у нацистів.
In fact, contrary to the Soviet myth, many thousands of communists, as long as they were not in the highest level of the communist old elite, were able to integrate themselves and serve in the German administration and therefore save their life. And this goes very much against what Soviet propaganda had said.
And special last question is the attention of Ukrainian nationalist to Jewish question, but it's special question.
You want me to translate into Ukrainian?
Sorry. Okay.
Sure.
Just a second.
Are you going to do it in English?
He doesn't English, that's not.
I hope you. Oh, nice. No. Just a second. I'd like to show you four units of my museum about relationship between Ukrainians generally and Jewish, about relationship between Ukrainian nationalists and Jewish question on the period of Holocaust. And I propose these four units. I'd like to talk all through, uncomfortable but through. And I see 4 points of this problematic. Number one, we need to say about Ukrainian nationalist participation in mass killing of Jews. It was true in Western Ukraine and in Central Ukraine, not only. It's one unit with information about this. Next, we can say about majority. Every time, in all critical situations, majority population are bystanders, including Ukrainian nationalists. We can see the same situation in eastern Ukraine now, in Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast. And this situation, the same situation, was in the period of war, bystanders. Next, we can say about Ukrainian nationalist participation in a rescue of Jews. For example, if you live in Dnipro area, Dnipropetrovskaya Oblast, we can say about Fedor Vovk or Ivan Vovchuk. He is it's a very difficult definition. Провідник Нікопольського районного проводу ОУН, head of Nikopol Department of Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and he was vice-president Української головної визвольної ради, vice president of Great Liberation Council, second figure after Yaroslav Stetsko, and he is Fedorov officially righteous among nations. It's number 3. Number 4, Jewish participation in Ukrainian nationalist movement. Because we have examples not only Jewish participation in medical system of UPA, Українська повстанська армія, but in ideological system of OUN, and we know Jews authors of official declarations of OUN, for example, to Tatarian, to Russian people after 1944. And we see general picture with 4 chapters. First, Jewish nationalist, Ukrainian nationalist participation in mass killing of Jews. Second, bystanders. Third, Ukrainian nationalists like righteous among nations. And last, Jewish participation in Ukrainian nationalist movement. What do you like from this list? And I remember interesting question from guest of our museum from Israel, if I right, she asked me, хто недоволен? Він запитав мене, хто не задоволений такою картиною? I said, only 4 categories of visitors: Ukrainian, Russian, Poles, and Jewish. Because it's uncomfortable through. Thank you.
Any other questions? Please.
I don't quite understand exactly the definition of the righteous. Is this somebody who rescued Jews who survived, or was it just somebody who, well, people in the village would help Jews for a certain time? They did risk their own children. Then after a short time, the Jews would go on, and many of them did not survive. How do you classify those people? That's number one.
Oh,
The question
it's Jewish tradition.
Do you have lists of, okay, I'll give you an example. In Holland, during the war, there was a high school. In that high school, there was a Jewish girl who had a Ukrainian father and therefore a Ukrainian name. I found out about this girl actually from the family where the girl lived, a Ukrainian family where the girl lived. Now, my cousin went to that high school. Before she died, I asked my cousin, did you know about her? And my cousin said, of course we do, half the school knew. No one, that girl survived, she was in New York. No one from that high school gave her away. I mean, she would have lost her life in no time if the Germans had been find out. Now, how do you classify incidents like that? Do you know about them? And I'm just wondering how many there are. I'm sure it's not the only one. I just happen to specifically know about the high school in Holland. That's where I was born.
Definition. Якщо можна, знов-таки, дефініція – це дуже важка річ, і з них починається розуміння питання, я б хотів відповісти рідною українською мовою.
Let me translate.
Okay.
So definitions are very difficult, and I'd like to try to do that in Ukrainian, my mother tongue.
Ви знаєте, що Яд Вашем, спеціальна комісія Яд Вашем висуває дуже суворі вимоги до того, щоб включити людину до списку праведників народів світу.
You probably know that Yad Vashem has very strict requirements to list people as righteous among nations.
Там є багато пунктів, які має це відповідати. Серед них, що це має бути не за гроші безкоштовно. Серед них те, що людина реально ризикувала життям.
Among those requirements is the person acted without any financial gain and was actually subject to possible repercussions and death.
Серед них, що ця людина, яка рятувала, не має бути євреєм.
And the person could not be a Jew who was the rescuer.
І головне, чи одне з головних пунктів, має бути свідчення тих євреїв, яких врятував.
And a key point is the Jews who are rescued are the key witnesses. Without them, they can't be listed. Is that right?
Якщо якихось з цих пунктів немає, то звання праведника не присуджується.
If they don't meet any of these requirements, then they cannot be listed.
І є ще політичні, на мій погляд, reasons, коли не присуджується звання, як у випадку з митрополитом Андреєм Шептицьким.
And there, from my perspective, political reasons for not listing someone, such as the case with Metropolitan Andriy Sheptetsky.
Але що стосується того терміну, який я запроваджую, Rescues of Jews, це ті люди, про яких не можна довести щось комісії Яд Вашему з певних причин. Я скажу яких.
And I'm talking about rescuers of Jews who would not be listed by Vladimir for specific reasons, and I'll explain those.
Я знайшов в архівах, це було диво для мене, десятки, сотні справ про українців та інших громадян, про яких ніхто не знав, що вони рятували євреїв.
I found within the archives tens of hundreds of files dealing with Ukrainians who saved Jews that no one was aware of these files.
Це здебільша справи Західної України, тому що якщо в Східній Україні чи в Центральній українець рятував єврея, його здебільша відразу розстрілювали на місці.
This was a situation in Western Ukraine. In Eastern and Central Ukraine, if a Ukrainian helped a Jew and was captured, he was shot on the spot.
Якщо це було в Західній Україні, наприклад, у Львові, у Дрогобичі, ще якихось місцях, то там була інша зона окупації, я спеціально для того показував зони окупації, і там не розстрілювали відразу, а був суд.
And in Western Ukraine, Drogobich, Lviv, it was a different area of occupation, if you could recall the map.
Галичина,
And in that situation, if a Ukrainian was captured, saving a Jew, rescuing a Jew, they would be tried.
І цей суд розглядав питання інколи тиждень, 2 місяць. Я знайшов справи, які продовжувалися за тиждень до вигнання нацистів із Львова. І українців за вироком розстрілювали за тиждень до того, як звільнили Львів.
These hearings would take days or months, and they continued until almost a week before the Soviets entered into Lviv, and people were shot as a consequence of those trials up to a week before the Soviets entered Lviv.
Але чому вони не могли стати праведниками? По-перше, ніхто не знайде тих євреїв, які вони рятували. Чому? Тому що як це справа в суді, значить знайшли і розстріляли і євреїв, і покарали тих, хто їх рятував. Хто може свідчити тоді?
And the reason that they're not righteous among the nations for Yad Vashem's purposes is because they were taken to trial, which meant the Jews that they were rescuing were caught and killed. So there were no witnesses to what they've done.
По-друге, майже завжди там стає фінансове питання. Тому що якщо переховувати когось 1 тиждень, це одна справа. А якщо переховувати 10 місяців, рік, 2 роки, євреї, я вам відкрию секрет, вони теж хочуть їсти.
And then comes the financial issue. It's one thing to hide someone for 10 days, but for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, it's a different issue. And I have to tell you, Jews do like to eat.
І потрібні гроші на їжу, інколи потрібні гроші на те, щоб давати хабарі якимось чиновникам, давати хабарі для того, щоб робити фейкові документи.
And this brings in the issue of finances. So the Jewish people would be giving these individuals funds for food, for acquiring fake documents, and again, Yad Vashem does not allow for the financial issue.
І останнє, якщо читаєш ці документи, вони написані українською, польською і німецькою мовами. Якщо читаєш ці документи, то очевидно, що кожна людина намагається себе виправдати якось, навіть перед цим клятим нацистським судом.
The files were written in Ukrainian, Polish, and German, and as in any trial situation, the accused were always trying to get acquitted.
І я просто не встигнув навести ці приклади з документів. Хтось каже, а я не знав, що це Сара Блюмбенталь, що вона єврейка.
I haven't even been able to research this further, but some people said Sarah
Бла-бла-бла.
Bloomfeld, I didn't know she was Jewish.
Інший чоловік по документах каже, а я рятував дитину австрійського єврея, австрійської єврейки, а я думав, що австрійських євреїв не знищують, вони нормальні.
Another Jew said, well, I saved the child of an Austrian Jew, but I didn't think Austrian Jews were being persecuted, so I thought it was okay.
І цікаво, що суд його присудив до смерті, а його дружину і доньку виправдав, тому що вони казали, що вони йому казали, не треба його ховати, того єврея.
So what happened is he was sentenced to death, but his wife and daughter were released because they had told him, according to the court documents, that they told him not to save this Jewish person, so they were released.
Дехто, практично всі говорили, та я хотів видати цього єврея буквально наступного дня, та я вже готувався, та я вже йшов, але мене перестріли перед цим.
So other accused said, you know, I was going to give up this Jewish person tomorrow, but I mean, the timing worked out wrong.
Ну, звичайно, це не герої, яким Яд Вашем хотів би дати звання.
So these are not heroes that Yad Vashem would want to recognize.
Але для мене найбільш цікаво було, коли адвокати, нацисти давали адвокатів на тому суді. Адвокати шукали різні мотиви, щоб виправдати своїх підопічних.
The strangest thing is that the Nazi authorities assigned lawyers to the accused, and the lawyers, being lawyers, tried to find any way they could get their clients off.
І там є, наприклад, такі речі, кажуть, це в промові адвоката, я хотів знайти цитату, в промові адвоката, ми маємо справу з такими забитими темними галичанами, які не знають грамоти і є анальфабетиками.
One lawyer's argument was, we're dealing with dark, ignorant Galicians who are illiterate and have no understanding of the situation.
Вони побачили перші літери під час Першої світової війни. І вони не знали, що євреїв треба знищувати.
Okay, so that they couldn't read, so they weren't aware of the requirement. I mean, they were aware of the First World War, and in that situation, Jews were not required to be killed, so they figured it was the same thing in the Second World War, but they were illiterate, so they didn't know that that was changed.
Щоб завершити, я хочу сказати, що за гроші чи без грошей кара все одно була смерть тим, хто рятував євреїв.
Either with funds or if the people were not paid, the sentence was always the same for the rescuers who were caught. That was death.
Якщо вдалося врятувати, єврей залишився живих, він сказав Яд Вашему. Якщо ні, то ні. Але це реальні рятівники, які хотіли рятувати, і вони заплатили за це своїм життям.
These individuals, though the Jewish people they were trying to rescue did not survive, these people gave their lives attempting to rescue people, notwithstanding Yad Vashem's definition.
Що стосується питання стосовно холму або хелм, чесно кажучи, я не дуже зрозумів і родинні відносини, про які ви говорили, але мова йде про дуже чіткі речі. Є погроми, дискримінація, є знищення під час Голокосту, є рятування з загрозою для життя, є надання допомоги.
I should have taken notes.
I'm sorry.
There are different elements to all of this. There are the pogroms of hatred. There is the Holocaust. There are a number of different elements of trying to eliminate the Jews.
І є рятування загрозою для власного життя, а є просто надання допомоги.
There is a differentiation of trying to rescue someone at the risk of one's own life, and as opposed to helping someone in some fashion.
І стосовно вашого конкретного питання, пані, ми, якщо хочете, я можу звернутися до своїх колег, які працюють з матеріалами по Хелму, і ми спробуємо знайти відповідь, якщо ми залишимось, і ви не скажете моїй дружині, що ми залишимось після лекції.
I will raise the issue of Helm with my colleagues who are working in the area of Helm, and I can talk to you about it later if my wife doesn't mind.
I think last few questions, yeah?
Yeah, I think this will be the last question.
Please.
Oops.
Ma'am. Yeah.
Thanks for a fascinating lecture. I'm wondering, we hear about the threat of death for saving Jews. But do we have any sense of how many people really did were killed by the Nazis for saving Jews? And one category would be, well, how many righteous are in Yad Vashem? I'm sorry, you had it on the slide, I didn't see it. But, and then how many do we think were killed by the Nazis for saving Jews?
Дякую. Кілька цифр просто, тому що їх дуже небагато. Взагалі, праведників народів світу близько 25 тисяч. З них 2,5 тисячі – це українці. Без урахування... Sorry. 25,000 righteous among the nations generally in the world. From this 10%, 2,500 Ukrainian righteous among nations. It's for this calculation. Next. Я не знаю і немає підрахунків, скільки українців за рятування євреїв було знищено.
I have no numbers in terms of how many Ukrainians died trying to rescue Jews.
Чому? Тому що це можна підрахувати знову-таки по Західній Україні, де є матеріали в архівах, матеріали судів.
You might be able to get an idea of how many people are involved in Western Ukraine, where there actually are court documents dealing with the trial of Jewish rescuers of Jews.
І я намагаюсь записати прізвища тих українців, яких знищили, розстріляли за вироком судів, за те, що вони рятували євреїв. У мене є ці списки.
And I am putting together a list of all the Ukrainians who were killed by the courts in Western Ukraine for saving Jews.
Але в центральній і східній Україні, де знищували без суду і слідства, знищували тисячами, десятками тисяч, неможливо підрахувати це точно.
However, in central and eastern Ukraine, where Ukrainians were killed in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, for attempting to rescue Jews, there's no way of knowing the numbers because it was all done just on the street, basically.
Unfortunately. Please, next question. Yeah. Okay. Я не чую нічого, вибачте.
Could you come to the microphone, please?
To microphone, please. Please.
Ну, я не знаю вже, в якій мові питати. Польській,
Тільки на
українській, англійській.
російській. Тільки на російській.
It's gonna have to translate.
Все зрозуміло. Ні, I'm just asking. Ну в українській мові. Якщо ви знаєте, ну і ви знаєте, бо ви сказали, що хтось загинув, конкретно загинув, розстріляли за це, що він пробував врятувати єврея, ну то чи ви не думаєте, що Yad Vashem повинен змінити цю дефініцію? Та що є ясно, що за це він загинув, він чи вона. Я думаю, що це є дуже несправедливо, що людина загинула і ніде немає про це мови. То одне, а два.
Okay,
Okay,
you've got to
translate.
translate. One question.
The question or comment is rather, it seems very unfair that Yad Vashem is not taking into account individuals who attempted to save Jews during the war or were killed in attempting to save Jews. Is there no way that Yad Vashem could be convinced to change its definition to recognize these individuals that haven't been recognized today?
It's first question, yeah?
Just
One question only.
one question.
Okay. I ask you, is it one question or no? Two. No, please second. Друге.
Ну, друге, це не так питання, але якщо ми знаємо, що вже є українці на 4-му місці, що рятували євреїв, А вони, напевно, були б, може, і на третьому місці, якщо б українці були як записані як українці, не як поляки, чи інші народи. В світлі того, як можна почати довести світові це, бо міжнародна преса, починаючи там чи BBC, чи Guardian, чи New York Times, чи Washington, всі важні газети, медіа, майже все, як ходить, значить, як що відноситься в акції рятування, ніколи немає мови, що українці це робили, то раз. А два, якщо десь навіть знайдеться якась, знаєте, людина, то скаже, ну це просто феномен, бо такого не було, це виняток.
Окей. Це, дякую.
We got to translate.
Okay.
Can you
So,
translate, yeah?
is there? You had mentioned that Ukraine was fourth among the righteous of the nations in Yad Vashem, but you also noted that in many cases Ukrainians were misidentified as either Soviet citizens or Polish citizens, and I'm just wondering, that is there any way of really recognizing all these individuals because of the general negative attitude towards Ukrainians vis-a-vis the Holocaust in the media, such as the New York Times and Washington Post? That is there any way of showing that Ukrainians actually were ordinary people that did work to save their neighbors?
And she said that perhaps the ranking would move
Yes.
from 4 to 3rd.
To third, yes.
Yes. Well, once the recognition of Ukrainians occurred.
Can be third place in the list of righteous among nations. Справа в тому, що у кожної організації є свої правила.
Okay. The problem is with every organization, each organization has its rules.
І Яд Вашем – це дуже така консервативна структура. В науковому плані, може, це і непогано.
Yad Vashem is a very conservative organization. And for research purposes, that's probably a very good thing.
І рішення про те, кого вважати праведником, а кого ні, було прийнято на рівні закону держави Ізраїль.
And the decision on who to recognize as righteous among nations for purposes of Yad Vashem was established by a law by the state of Israel.
І, до речі, саме створення Яд Вашему було сказано, у тому числі для того, щоб вшанувати тих героїв, які з ризиком для власного життя рятували євреїв. Це одне з завдань базисних створення Яд Вашем.
And Yad Vashem was created to recognize the people who heroically gave their lives in order to save Jews.
Я хочу сказати, що робить наукова спільнота і громадська, щоб щось змінити.
I have to say that the research community and the general community is trying to influence Yad Vashem to make changes.
Я говорив про це з Авнером Шалевом, генеральним директором Яд Вашем.
I spoke with the general director of Yad Vashem on this issue.
Авнер Шалев. Піднімали питання окремо про митрополита Андрея Шептицького.
I also raised the issue about Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky.
Такий відомий історик ізраїльський, як Шимон Редліх, дуже багато доклав зусиль для того, щоб змінилася позиція Яд Вашем.
And famous Israeli historian
Шимон Редліх.
Also has been working hard to change Yad Vashem's position on Metropolitan Sheptytsky.
Але головне, величезну роботу проводить з цього Ukrainian Jewish Encounter.
But a great deal of work in this area is being done by the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter.
Це як на науковому рівні, на рівні конференції, так і на суспільному. І ви знаєте, що була спеціальна делегація різних духовних осіб в парламенті Канади, і була певна резолюція парламенту Канади стосовно праведників, стосовно митрополита Андрея Шептицького.
And there have been conferences and discussions in the community, and a delegation of religious leaders met with Parliament to have Metropolitan Sheptytsky recognized as righteous among nations.
Але я б не хотів абсолютизувати значення того звання. Я б не хотів, I don't want to make accent to this definition, righteous among nations, by Yad Vashem. Because we have personal attention to this genius figure of Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky, or to other really rescues, really righteous among nations. Sorry. І, наприклад, в моєму музеї зала, яка називається «Праведники народів світу», найбільша і найперша зала там присвячена митрополиту Шептицькому, тому що для мене, для українців, для євреїв, для українських євреїв він вже давно праведник.
And I have to underline that the first and largest room in our museum is dedicated to Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky because he is recognized by Ukrainians and especially Ukrainian Jews as being righteous among nations.
Але ви подивіться, як довго просувалася справа беатифікації митрополита Андрея.
But you have to also remember how long the beatification process is taking for Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky.
І це mені нагадує позицію Яд Вашем.
And this suggests
If I write, I don't know.
the same position as Yad Vashem. Reminds me of the position of Yad Vashem.
Але ви абсолютно праві, що ми маємо руйнувати міфи про українців як погромників, як тих, хто знищує, а натомість просувати правду про те, що було. І, до речі, клянуся, це випадково випили оцей...
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. We have to fight the myths of Ukrainians as pogromchiks and anti-Semites and tell the story as it really is.
Це випадково слайд із мого музею. Це як рояль в кущах знайшли. Так ось тут про колаборацію. І радянська, і сучасна російська пропаганда намагається показати, що українці – це суцільні колаборанти, союзники нацистів.
This is a cabinet from our museum that deals obviously with collaboration. And this is the myth that the former Soviet government and now the current Russian government is pushing, that all Ukrainians are anti-Semites and collaborators.
Але насправді, за підрахунками, які вже прийняті наукою, відомо, що абсолютно інші є цифри.
And after deep research, it's been established that this myth of collaboration is a myth, and the numbers show it.
And for example, here in 1943, after Stalingrad battle, in Wehrmacht was 1,200,000 former Soviet citizens. From this majority, 400,000 Russians. It's a place number one. Second, Ukrainian and other. But you know about mythology about Crimean Tatarian by collaborators or Belarusian like Soviet partisan. It's causes, it's funny, but in this list we see in Wehrmacht was 20,000 Belarusians, 20,000 Crimean Tatars. But for this conclusion, author of this scholarly work, a Russian scientist Alexandrov, had arrest and has many problems with job after liberation and etc. But it's true, and we need to talk about real situation with righteous among nations, with collaboration, with all very hard problems of the history of Second World War and Holocaust. Maybe it's last question, yeah?
It's not a question, this is a commendation.
Thank you.
You made two firsts, from what I can see. Number one, the first time that somebody converted from English to Ukrainian, which is great, this is what we want to hear, even in Ukraine, never mind just here in Canada.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I had an opportunity with my wife Valentina to visit your museum 2 years ago, and I think you have another first there. He's got quite a large exhibit about Holodomor in the Holocaust Museum. Good planning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, the Kurile family. And I'd like to say, my principal approach, scholarly and public approach to this problematic is we can research Holocaust only in the content of other genocide, including Holodomor. From this reason, we created, thanks to you supporting, we created whole dedicated to Holodomor, whole dedicated to deportation of Crimean Tatars, whole dedicated to Armenian genocide, and etc. It's completely a review problematic of genocide on the territory of Ukraine and around. And if we want to hope for understanding of Holodomor problematic, we need to teach Holocaust. And from other hand, if we want to have popularization of problematic of Holocaust, we need to say about Holodomor. And you know, Valentina Kurilov had participated on special Holodomor summer school in Chernomorsk, a few months ago. And in this city, before this seminar, was seminar about Holocaust with maybe 50 or 60% participants, both. One and second problem. It's need to provide Holodomor and Holocaust studies in Ukraine, but not only, in Canada, in Western world. And you are right, we need to get information to New York Times, to Washington Post, to other newspapers, and to public society, but after a very strong scholarly ground of this problematic. Thank you.
I'll ask Dr. Sisson from the Canadian Institute of University Ukrainian Studies here in Toronto for concluding remarks.
Just very short, we can't make up for lost time and lost opportunities and things that we could have done earlier. We have to start from here. In speaking with Mr. Temerte, one of the points he made was if one would look at the statistics of how many Poles were declared righteous before 1989, and then try to say, okay, had Ukraine been able to take part in such contacts, to make those proposals, would we not have a very different number of Ukrainians? I think it is a very good point. I was thinking of this to know one personal case, and that is Professor Igor Shchupak, who many of you know is a great scholar and Byzantinist, whose mother saved a Jewish family during the war in Warsaw, and later that family wound up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I wondered how she was accounted. She was the head of Soyuz Ukrainok of Warsaw, but probably fell under the Polish statistic of that time as well. If that's the way Yad Vashem did this. I talked about time and what we did and could have done and should have done earlier. Ukrainian Jewish contacts and relations, in many ways in discussions, goes back to the late 1970s and early 1980s as organized groups, and I want to remind you of that. And particularly beginning this, Professor Peter Potichny and Howard Astor, who were very active here in Canada in putting out this material. I have with me the Ukrainian Jewish Relations in Historical Perspective. This is the third edition that was put out by our institute. It was a conference of the 1980s that was a breakthrough on this issue. In many ways because Professor Omoinan Pritsak and Professor Shmuel Ettinger, who had become close friends for scholarly studies of very distant periods, were able to bring together a group here in Hamilton, I guess, in McMaster's at that point. And it was a breakthrough in many ways, a rather stormy breakthrough at times in that conference. But when one opens up this book, and I hope all of you will get a copy of it, our institute has copies and would love to get you some of them. One finds an article by Aaron Weiss, Jewish-Ukrainian Relations in Western Ukraine During the Holocaust. That is, Professor Weiss already at that time was traveling, discussing these things, and we see from the film later that is done about him, and now a book about him, how much that incident mattered in that unique relationship of that time. The book is in its third edition because UJE has given us a subsidy to put it out again. And we are all very fortunate that the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter systematically and on many levels deals with these issues, from supportive museums to popular publications to scholarly conferences many of us had participated in. And the Temerte Foundation, which supports activities, also, of course, supports our activities on the Holodomor. And indeed, my talk, I think fortunately, was taken away from me by our speaker, who pointed out that one needs to study both these events. One needs to study them comparatively. One needs to study as a group about them. We will be having a conference on the 18th and 19th of October that REC, as well as REC, our Holodomor initiative, as well as the Center for Holocaust Studies from the University of Massachusetts, Jewish Studies here at the University of Toronto, the Chair of Ukrainian Studies, and many other institutions are taking part in, to discuss the issue of genocide. And that issue will be how the concept of genocide has developed. It will have a substantial part on the Holocaust, a substantial part on the Holodomor. There will be 2 public lectures associated with it. One by Norman Neymark, I think known to many of you for his study of Stalinist genocide, and another by Ludmila Hranevich, who will be speaking specifically, be our Holodomor lecturer for this year. Of course, what has changed so dramatically is that the world of the early 1980s was one in which we here in Canada or North America, to a great degree, were isolated from Ukraine and from the groups whom we studied, just as they were not permitted to really study these issues. What has changed so tremendously is now we have this global world and these global contexts, and that we can have someone from Dnipro and from this quite remarkable building and institute and museum take part and travel both to Yad Vashem and to us. He, after all, is a good Canadian boy as well, and therefore is part of our community here. He also, I might add, is very active in the German-Ukrainian Historical Commission. And we talked about American press and the need to influence New York Times and Washington Post. But of course, I think one of the most important areas to influence opinions about Ukrainians in the Second World War is, above all, Germany. We will be having a conference of that commission in October, which will deal with many of these same issues and deal with World War II. And Dr. Shchupak is remarkable in the number of activities, the number of talks, and his wide knowledge. And I would like to ask you to join me in thanking him for this wonderful presentation and wish him all the best.
I'm sorry for my ugly English. I'm sorry. Останнє, що я хотів сказати, тут було дуже багато розмов щодо Яд Вашем. Ви знаєте, з одного боку є Яд Вашем, а з іншого Ukrainian Jewish Encounter. І я не знаю, чий голос буде сильніший. Тому що UJE проводить величезну роботу. Головне, вдалося акумулювати неймовірний науковий потенціал людей, які є справді провідниками світової науки. І те, що робить UJE, має величезне значення. Спасибі велике, пан Джим Темертей. Дякую.